Why 431? What does that stand for?
It's nothing significant. It's my area code.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
You're not a 204?
No, I'm a 431. And I was 204. I used to be 204.
Yeah.
And when I was going to register the business name, it wouldn't let me because there's too many businesses that are kind of similar, like 204 strength or 204 strength and conditioning or something like that.
Yeah.
So there were other businesses that were too similar. And then so I wouldn't, like they said I couldn't register that.
Yeah, yeah.
So got a new phone number anyway. And then I just figured, 431, that's perfect.
Oh, that's convenient.
Very.
Sweet. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was super excited. We went out for a coffee. This must have been back in January or February. And you kind of let me in on the big secret that this was going to be a thing and you're going to have your own headquarters.
Yeah.
That's sweet. Would you mind sharing a bit of that story?
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of people out there who kind of have this dream to do their own thing, and not a lot of people go for it, let alone actually see it realized.
Right. So a little bit of backstory on that. I was working full-time as a painter in town here with some of my friends that owned a painting business. And I was training and doing coaching, stuff like that on the side. So mornings and evenings. And it was getting to a point where I couldn't do either job very well or like really well. Stuff was going to start to suffer in both just because of the scheduling and the just the demand on it. And so I was talking with my wife and she said, well, would you ever just go full-time training, which was our dream? And I said, yeah, I would love to, but I kind of have to make sure that we can eat, right? Like, is that going to be a sustainable business? And she's like, well, I would rather try now. And if it fails, we'll figure it out. But if you don't do it now and you get stuck in a job where you're just like, this pays the bills, but I don't love it. My wife is good for me. She said, I don't want to grow old with a man wondering if he could have done it, like living in that should have, could have, would have sort of thing. And always wondering, like, I should have done that. Could I have done that, And she's like, now's the time. Our kids are small and we can try it. So she fully supported it. And so I did. I phased myself out of painting full time, went down to part time, and then increased my hours training at a different gym, like a private gym in town. And that worked. My clientele started to, become more and more. And then it got to a point where we thought like, okay, I think it's time we can just ditch the painting and then do this full time. And then that worked for about a year. And then it got to a point there where I was thinking, you know what, I think I could do this on my own. Because it's always been in the back of my mind for years and years, like, I wonder what it would be like to have my own place, So I just started buying equipment. And it was kind of handy because COVID came along and then I had all this equipment in my basement to train with when I couldn't really go to the gym that much. And so, yeah, I just had a ton of equipment and one thing kind of led to another, and here we are. I have my own place now. Yeah. So
nice. That's terrific.
Yeah.
You mind showing us around?
Yeah, for sure.
Sweet.
Yeah. Well, hey, here we are. The space is about 1,100 square feet, and it's got all the space that I need. The maximum amount of people that I can have in here, pretty much, to operate a group effectively is like 16 people, and so I have 3 squat racks. 2 of them are full cages. I have 3 platforms. There's the other squat rack there. I got a bunch of dumbbells, kettlebells, my turf, my sled, some cardio pieces here, my suspension trainer over there, and then some unused space up at the top. That eventually will turn into my office and
my podcast studio.
And my podcast studio, that's right. And then I want to actually start producing some merchandise, like 431 Strength Squadron gear, and then I'll have a little store up there. It's pretty basic. It has sort of that Rocky Balboa vibe, which is perfect. I love that. So, yeah, it's great. all my clients are loving it in here too. They've really enjoyed the space. The door is a fantastic plus, especially when it starts to cool off a little bit, and then it just, it just kind of changes the whole atmosphere in here. You have the big door open, music pumping, and people are just realizing their goals. They're getting stronger, they're dropping pounds, building muscle, so it's perfect in here, man. It's awesome.
I think my favorite part of your story is it wasn't even you believing in your own vision. It was your wife.
Yeah.
Who had the faith in you and had the faith in the visions and the dreams that the Lord had put on your heart.
Oh yeah.
To push you into it. Because that was probably a step, like you said, you have mouths to feed at home. You probably weren't comfortable taking that step, right?
I was about as apprehensive as I could have ever been about anything. I would just keep thinking, have you ever seen Cinderella Man?
No.
With Russell Crowe? Anyway, it's a boxing movie from the Depression. And he's trying to fight and then earn a living for his family going through the Depression. And it's like he's fighting and his kids are eating like little tiny pieces of meat, and he's not eating anything because he's giving all this stuff to his kids so that they can survive. And I just keep kind of picturing my kids just looking up like, Dad, can we eat soon? Like if you, whatever. It's just, I think it's in a man to want to be able to provide for his family and give them everything that they need and lots of what they want. It's not always possible, but yeah, I just didn't want to take the gamble. But my wife was super supportive and very convincing. And it wasn't just her though. So we did tons of prayer, lots of fasting, and just actually seeking God's heart on, should I leave painting? Should I start this business? Should I try and invest in it and grow it and then take it to a place where where I can only dream of, right? And we really felt like God was saying, yeah, do it. Like, I've put these desires in your heart. I've given you certain skills. And why would you not use them? You know what I'm saying? When our heart is purposefully seeking God's will, and we're truly wanting to please Him with our lives, then when we're asking for things in prayer, like, God, should I do this? Should I do that? Where do you want me to go? I think He puts it in our hearts to be like almost being able to recognize His voice in that situation and be like, this is where I want you to go, And so this is where we went. It's working out so far. No pun intended.
I don't know if you heard the first episode. A couple of days ago, I had a conversation with my friend Richard.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about like moving into your calling and moving into your vision and how to do that in a way that's congruent with our identities in Christ.
Yeah.
And with the will of God for our lives. And something that he said that really struck me was that staying balanced going into that comes down to your motive. And that if you're going into something and it's something that you need to do to validate your ego or to prove you to you or to prove you to somebody else, then
Mm-hmm.
in that sense, it's almost idolatry because it's something that you're looking for fulfillment outside of Christ and what He's done for you, right?
Yeah.
This is a bit of a tangent, but we've both been in situations where we've had dreams on our lives. For me, that's looked like pursuing trading. For you, that's been building your business with fitness, with your gym.
Yeah.
And in both of those situations, it was our wives who really convinced us to pull the trigger on it. So I remember we used to work at Canadian Tire together.
We did.
This is like 10 years ago.
We did.
And I remember we were driving somewhere in a work truck, like we're picking something up or delivering, and there was this girl walking by, and I commented that she was cute. And first thing you do is you're like, yeah, I'll introduce you. I was like, do you know her? You're like, no, but I'll introduce you. I'm great at that.
Yeah, it's true. Man, here's a story about something like that. So years ago, my friend and cousin, family member, Aaron Hudson, A-Train, we went to go see a movie in the city, me and him and a couple of other guys. And we must have been, I wasn't married yet, we were probably 18, 19 years old. And there were these couple girls that were looking at him. And he's like, oh man, they're kind of cute. And I said, cool. And then I just went up to them and I said, hey, my buddy over there, he thinks you're kind of cute. and then so they he ended up ditching us and going to see a movie with them. And then we couldn't find him for hours after that. We had no idea where he was, what he was doing, and we were waiting to go home because he had no other ride in. Like, I drove. And so we're like, man, maybe we should just leave him here. You know, we didn't. We waited for him. But yeah, I'm great at setting people up like that.
And that leads into my next question for any single guys watching.
Yeah.
What are some words of wisdom on how to find a lady? Because I know you listen to Bedros' show, right?
No, I don't.
Okay. Something Bedros says all the time on his show is that the number one determining factor of a man's success is who he marries.
Oh.
And it's like that hit home.
Yeah.
Because it's like, yes, there's no way I would have ever taken the leaps that I have as far as learning new skills or taking these risks if my wife wasn't behind me.
Dude, that makes perfect sense. Because you can have a woman who is sort of like a bit of a nag.
Yeah.
And then who will just constantly complain about stuff and kind of keep you down and not help you realize your ambition. Or you can have a woman like ours, like our women, who will fan that flame and encourage it and like want you to reach your potential as a man and as a provider, because then you're going to be a better husband. You're going to be a better father. You're going to be a better person because you're actually feeling productive. You're actually feeling like you're making a difference for somebody else instead of just going somewhere to collect a paycheck to please a wife who just nags you all the time. Can I say that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to get in any trouble.
I'll be shadow banned by tomorrow, but
Yeah. No, that makes total sense though.
How long have you been married now?
This July 23rd, 2023, I think would have been 17 years.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
Almost 2 decades.
Yeah.
Well, good for you guys.
We got some time in.
So, I mean, obviously, I've thought about it. Like, what would I tell someone getting into the dating scene in 2023? Like, what would be my advice for a single guy? And I say, I don't even know, because it happens completely differently now than when you would actually meet people in person, right? If you're a single guy, what are the green flags in a potential partner, and what are the red flags? And then adding on to that, like, what does it look like to actually start building that kind of a relationship?
Yeah, man, good question. I think some red flags are if she asks how much you make right away. And if she's looking to get married on the first date, maybe not, I don't know. Also too, what is she like with her family? What is she like with her friends? What is she like at a restaurant to a server? You know, how does she treat people that she doesn't know? What is she like with kids? Those kinds of things. And then what is her belief system? What is her worldview? What are her morals? That kind of thing, because that will shape your future. Look at King Solomon, right? Like
A good example.
he started off pretty good, and then it went south pretty hard. So, like, just being influenced by immoral people, in this case, like an immoral woman.
Well, that's like half of the Proverbs are basically saying this is how you keep yourself out of a situation like that, right?
Yeah.
I think that applies just as well to partnerships in every other area of your life as well. But no partnership is going to affect your life to the degree that your marriage will.
No, that touches every area of your life. And if you don't have support from your spouse on something like that, or your girlfriend or your fiance at that point, then I don't think you'll ever have it, you know? So if you want to reach your potential, find somebody who is like-minded with you, who is supportive, who likes adventure, and who has strong faith. Because man,
I guess I would add to that too, is someone who is not risk averse, especially if you're someone who has dreams and ambitions.
Yeah. So my wife and I, personality-wise, are completely different. So this is why it surprised me when she was so encouraging for me to go and do this, because she's very organized. She has a plan. She makes plans. She's responsible. And I am not,
right,
most of the time. But when it came to this decision. She's like, let's do it. I'm excited. And I said, really? I'm terrified. And so it just totally switched there on those two things. But yeah, she's my ride or die. Bonnie and Clyde, if this thing goes off the cliff, then she's right there beside me. So
she told you to put your foot on the pedal too. So
yeah, she did. Yeah, she did 100%. So
how did you guys meet?
Man, we met in high school. Actually, no, we met in junior high school.
No way.
7th grade. She moved to town, and yeah, we went to the same youth group at church, and over the years we just became friends. And like, it was 12th grade. I just was like, instead of going to class all the time, I'd kind of sometimes just sit out in the hall, or use my spare period to just sit out in the hall and just like hang out with friends. And then I saw her through the door in her classroom, and I had seen her 100 times before. And then I looked, and something just hit different. And it was like, don't remember feeling that before. You know? And then it just kind of grew from there. It was the funniest thing. I asked her out probably 2 or 3 times. She said no every time, but I just stayed persistent. So there is this persistence, discipline, consistency. That's how you get jacked. That's how you get a girl. But there was this event at our church. It was the 30-hour famine. You remember those? Mm. But there was a 30-hour famine. We'd been there all night. And I had already established the fact that I was going to try and communicate to her somewhat of my feelings, right? Didn't happen. I was way too scared. But I hung around her the whole night. Mm. And I would offer to like help her with stuff. Mm. She did singing and praise and worship for the event and stuff like that. And at the end of the event, I'd like, hey, do you need help cleaning up? She's like, no, I'm good. I'm done. Like, oh, I said, I got a car. Do you need a ride home? She's like, no, I actually live like a block that way. I'm like, oh, every time I try to do something for her or help her, she shuts me down.
And have you asked her out twice already at this point?
No.
Or she didn't know anything?
At this point, she had no idea.
You're going in cold.
Yeah, I'm going in cold. So then, like, it was heavy on my heart. So one day I'm like, I gotta let her know. So I wrote her a poem. I wrote her a poem. And then I stuck it on her friend's windshield wiper, because we parked near each other, mm-hmm. off campus. And so her friend gets the note, and then she reads it like a good friend. She doesn't make sure it's a creep, right? Mm-hmm. So then she takes it over to my wife. We're at her parents' house, and then she's like, you got to read this. And then it totally threw her for a loop. She's like, I had no idea. And so then we had this really awkward conversation in my car as we were driving around. And you're just like, it's winter time, but you're still sweating. It's crazy, man. But then, hey, you stay persistent. She finally said, yes, I'll date you. And then we dated for 3.5 years, and then got married at 21.
Wow.
Yeah, young.
How many kids do you guys have now?
3.
Terrific.
Yeah, 3 boys. Yeah.
So at what point in your journey do you get into fitness?
Oh, man. High school. Yeah, me and my buddies, the same buddy that I set up with those girls.
No way.
Yeah, we started training together.
Were you training for anything in particular, for sports?
No, just to get jacked. Yeah, because I was probably like 135 pounds, and I was like, I need to put some weight on. He's like, you want to go to the gym? I said, yeah, let's try it out. And we just loved it. And then people started noticing, like, hey, you're working out. Like, yeah, I'm working out. And then they're like, it's working a little bit. Sweet. So I think I graduated high school maybe at like 145 in 2003.
How much do you weigh now? You got to be 200-ish.
Yeah, I'm 200. So like since high school, so it's taken 20 years. So for you hard gainers out there, it's taken me 20 years to get from like 140 to 200. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of that was just not knowing what I was doing training in the first place.
Right.
And then like probably eating not enough and mostly the wrong kinds of food. Because at that point you just don't know. But then it's like you start to do a little bit more reading because you actually really like it. I'm like, oh, I didn't think I'd like it this much, but I loved it. Mm. Just training was so much fun to me. And then you start learning a little bit here, a little bit there. You start applying some of that stuff that you learn, and shoot, it works, right? Then, yeah, it just snowballed from there. Eventually, I go to school for it, like university for kinesiology and other certifications and stuff like that. And now here we are.
I remember you telling me before, because your degree, is that Bachelor of Science Kinesiology?
It's a BKin, so Bachelor's of Kinesiology, yeah. So it's its own degree program at the U of M.
So you have a Bachelor of Kinesiology.
Yep.
And you've told me before, but I remember trying to calculate how expensive your brain would be. And it's a lot. Like what are some other, you probably have like too many to list, but what are some of your other certifications that you're most proud of or most excited about?
Yeah. I have from the National Strength and Conditioning Association, so the NSCA, they have a few different designations, and the one that I chose to pursue is the CSCS, so a Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist. That was expensive. The exam was expensive, especially if you don't pass it the first time. You got to take it again. I was off by like 2 questions. Yeah, but I killed it the second time. And another one, the one that I've found the most valuable in terms of information and then practical application is the CPPS, which is a Certified Physical Preparation Specialist. And so Joe DeFranco and Jim Smith, or Smitty, they have this certification they put together, and it is so comprehensive. I remember going through it like about 1.5 years ago and thinking, this actually should just be the university course. It's super in-depth, very detailed, everything from assessments to programming warm-ups to programming exercise selections based on the warm-ups, and then basically bridging the gap between the issues that you find, which is limitations in either mobility or stability, and then like closing that gap with the warm-ups and the exercises that you choose. So making sure that people have the requisite mobility and the stability in a joint to have the greatest potential to express their strength. So if you don't have mobility in a joint, and if that joint is unstable, so if it's stiff and shaky, you're not going to be strong. If you can move it through a bigger range of motion, and you can resist force, which is essentially the definition of stability, like resisting external force, then you're going to be able to produce a ton of output, just strength.
I got to think that there's a lot of people out there who would like to get in shape and would like to start doing either weight training or some form of exercise, but maybe aren't, just because they don't feel like they have the stability or the mobility.
Yeah.
I know I've been there too. I had a shoulder injury, and it was actually scary for me to start lifting because I was like, if my shoulder goes under the bar, then what, right? So for people who maybe have that concern, or maybe they don't have the greatest stability or mobility in their joints, what would be a couple of your tips or suggestions for people to at least start doing something and start building a foundation that they can later build off of? Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff that I've learned is from a company called Prescript. And so they essentially started as 2 chiropractors, Jordan Shallow and Jordan Jinta. And their whole mantra is mobility, stability, strength. So I learned a ton of stuff from them. They have a ton of courses. I haven't taken any of them yet, but their level 1 course is like their flagship foundational course. And I want to end up taking that one hopefully within this next year, but which is basically applied biomechanics. But if you're looking to get more stable and more mobile, it's like work on your squat pattern. So try and do things to help your squat get a little bit deeper. That'll help with the mobility in your hips. But if you can't, I mean, a more in-depth assessment would reveal why you're restricted, why you can't get into those positions, and then we could work on specific exercises to improve that. But basically, try and get into the greatest range of motion as possible for a specific movement, and then do things standing on one leg. So things like lunges, or single leg squats, things like that, split squats even. Basically decreasing the external stability. So like you could do a single leg RDL and you could hang on to a squat rack. So you're on one leg, so your stability is less, right? Because you don't have 2 feet on the floor. And then your brain is sensing, oh, this is wobbly, right? So then you can grab onto a squat rack or something to add a little bit of stability, and then work through a range of motion like that. And then as your brain starts to recognize that, okay, I can balance myself, I can stay here a little bit easier, then take your hand away, and then keep producing that stimulus of instability, because that will make your brain recognize that there's an issue there, and then your body will start to engage different muscles to create stability. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like you have to put yourself in those vulnerable positions, safely, of course, obviously, and progress to more difficult levels.
Yeah.
But you have to put yourself in those positions of instability for your body to recognize that there's an issue, so that it can start to recruit everything it needs to keep you stable. So standing on one leg, doing single leg exercises, doing single leg presses overhead, or single arm presses overhead, things like that, that'll challenge the shoulder, that'll challenge your rib cage in relation to your hips and all that sort of stuff, right? So, just doing like single leg things or single limb things, and just challenging the level of instability. Okay, so the first thing that I would do when assessing somebody for a squat, especially if they've never done it before, is to say, okay, Bram, I'm just going to get you to sit down on that box. So just plop your butt down right there. And what I want you to do is find a place where you can comfortably stand up with your feet. Okay?
Okay, so no hands.
So no hands. Okay. And then stand up. Okay. And then ask, how does that feel? Always try and get feedback from the person to see what's going on with their body in that specific situation. So, Bram, what do you feel there?
It's doable, but I feel tightness in my hips, and I feel like it's the depth is uncomfortable.
Right. Okay, so if the depth would be uncomfortable, then to find the better spot for mechanics for your hips and things like that, I would say, like, let's not go that deep. So let's just do this. Let's get a plate, put it on the box, and say, okay, now let's do the same thing. Good.
Much easier.
Much easier? Okay, good. So then when we found a comfortable depth to work with the current range of motion that you have, okay, then I would say, all right, so now what I want you to do is, from a standing position, let's see you do about 5 reps. And then what I'll do is I'll just stand back and kind of watch you go through it. Good. And the whole time what I'm doing is I'm looking at his body. I'm looking at his hips, his torso position, his feet, his ankles, his chest, where he's looking. All these things play a factor. Okay. So how does that feel?
Depth is better, still tight in the hips.
Still tight in the hips. Okay. So then if we know that depth is good, but hips are still a little bit tight, then it's like, okay, we need to work on, not releasing, but maybe increasing the range of motion in your hips, and then work those hips through an active range of motion. So part of what we want to try and do is improve the range of motion, and then once we've made those improvements, let's activate it through a loaded movement so that your brain starts to recognize that new range of motion, right? So then the next time you get into a position like that, your brain recognizes it, it knows that it has this new freedom and this new range of motion, and it's kind of secured it in place. It's like walking down a path in tall grass, you know? It's like your hips are tight, so it's like this is the path that they always go down. Now we're going to open up those hips, we're going to walk beside that path, and now we're going to wear down a new path. Let that other one grow up or get overgrown, and then we're just going to keep on working this new path, this new movement pattern, basically, right? So then what we'd want to do is give you some specific mobility exercises, like a couch stretch is good, but I mean, the assessment would reveal where you're tight specifically, and then what kinds of things we could do from there. So, but yeah, generally, if people sit a lot, then their hip flexors in the front tend to get tight, so we can do like a banded couch stretch to help open that up. And then we would get you to squat again, maybe load you with the kettlebell for a goblet squat, and then see how that feels. Chances are it would feel a lot better. And then we know, okay, that's one of the mobility exercises that we're going to program maybe in your warm-ups or on some recovery days, so that you can keep that range of motion and keep wearing that new path down. Does that make sense?
I know something, pretty much every time we get together, I end up complaining and moaning about my aches and pains, and you usually give me something that usually really helps.
Okay.
I think we've talked about this before, that one of your specialties is, I guess one of your strengths is, you said, getting people out of pain.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not anything super magical. Louis Simmons, rest in peace, had one of the greatest. Pour one out for Louis. Had one of the greatest quotes, and it's "Weak things break." So if people are broken or they're dealing with pain, it's funny because injuries are a little bit different than pain. Injury is like a tissue situation, like your tissue is damaged, right? But then the tissue itself can heal, but neurologically your pain is still, or your brain is still perceiving pain there. And so basically we have to teach your brain to think differently about pain. So a lot of the times it's
Sorry, can you repeat that just to clarify, to
Yeah.
make sure I'm understanding? So what you're saying is if you have an injury, your body knows that, let's say my elbow is damaged, and the injury heals up, but there's still pain there just because the brain has installed pain into that area
Exactly.
to protect it from further injury.
yeah,
Oh,
100%.
interesting. So
yeah.
just because something's painful doesn't mean that it's necessarily injured.
No,
Interesting.
yeah, it's super interesting. So you basically have to unlearn pain. And so a lot of the times, like let's take back pain, for example. There's a couple people that I've worked with in the past that when they train or they stand or they walk, they're like, they have pain in their low back. And when you look at them, sorry, Mike, but when you look at them and you see them standing, their hips are tilted forward. So it's like an anterior pelvic tilt. So then what happens is some of the deep hip flexor muscles that attach from your femurs to your spine, like your lower vertebrae, they're on a pull, like they're stretched, okay? And then your hamstrings, which go from the crossing over the back of your knee joint and attach onto the bottom of your hips, because your hips are tilted forward, those hamstrings are now in a lengthened position. So they're always tight, they're always stretched, right? And so what that does is it creates this constant pull. And then your structures are being pulled in different directions by muscles because they're just, like your structure just is constantly in this compromised position, right?
There's always tension on something that shouldn't necessarily be.
There's always tension on something where there shouldn't be. There should be like balance, right? So then a couple of these people, what we've done is, it's like, okay, let's just teach you how to stand a little bit different. So let's take your hips from this forward tilted position and let's push them like this, using your glutes, just like thinking about pushing your hips forward a little bit. Your glutes will start to engage and they'll level your hips out. And then they're like, oh, this makes a huge difference already. Like just learning how to stand a little bit differently. Okay, now let's try this. Now let's get your core activated and engaged, because when your glutes are on tension or when your glutes are activated, you can't bend your hips, right? And you can't walk. If it does, it looks like you had too many coffees and you're about to explode, right? And you can't really walk because you're going to crap your pants. Has that ever happened to you?
Crap my pants?
No.
I was gonna say, there's been some pretty heavy squat sessions where it's been close, but
No, where you have to like clench your cheeks so tight that you can't even walk.
actually I have noticed that when I was squatting a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of the time when I would be walking anywhere, I looked like I was wearing a squat suit. I think like when you were describing the hips being tight,
Yeah.
the glutes are tight so that the hips can't bend, right?
Right.
And that made sense to me right away, because I knew that feeling where after a weekend full of heavy squats, it was I would kind of have to do a cowboy walk to get upstairs because hip flexion was uncomfortable for getting up the stairs. Right?
Yeah, for sure. So then what we have to do then is we have to relax the glutes so that the hips can still move, but then we have nothing stabilizing our hips. So then we have to get our core involved, right? So the core goes from the base of your sternum down to the pubic bone on your hips. So if we can contract that and use your core to keep those hips in a nice level position, now we can squat, we can hinge, we can press overhead now, because our hips are held in this neutral or flat level position without needing the glutes, because the musculature of the core is now keeping the hips in place. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's activating the glutes, using the core, using your breathing to help stabilize this whole system in your trunk with your glutes and your abs and your breathing. That will allow for a pain-free standing position for some of these people. And then from there, it would be teaching them how to move doing things like squatting, lunging, hinging, reaching, pushing, even like this, with this new position, right? And a lot of the time they're going to be like, ooh, like my glutes are on fire, my core is on fire. It's like, well, of course, because they've never been asked to do these things for that duration of time, right? Because now you're using all of this surrounding musculature to stabilize your structure in this nice straight level position. So it's more to it than just like stand up straight and move around. Like there's a lot that goes into something like that.
Having the right cues makes a big difference too, because someone might hear stand up straight and they just pull their shoulders back, right? And meanwhile their hips are caved in. Yeah. So understanding something, it's a great line. I quoted this in my last episode too, but Rickson Gracie is one of the best jiu-jitsu fighters of all time. Yeah. And his dad told him, he's like, a good jiu-jitsu teacher knows how to teach techniques really well. He said a great jiu-jitsu teacher knows why and how and what to communicate to each student. So he knows why they need to learn something and what to say to them so that they actually get it.
Oh yeah. And that's a huge key point. If people don't know why they're doing something, there's no buy-in, right? So people have to know the why. Jocko Willink will say that. You got to know why. And knowing how to effectively communicate. Like words and language are super important, because if you're using language to someone, like if I'm coaching you and I tell you something and you're like, I don't understand that. Well, what does it help me saying that to you if it doesn't help you, if you don't understand it, right? So that's one thing about coaching is you have to know your client. You have to know how they communicate and what's going to make sense to them. And then you have to know how many cues they can take. Like if someone's brand new and I'm telling them 5 different cues, forget it. It's gonna go off the rails instantly. It's like, let's just focus on one thing, the most important thing, the foundational thing. Let's start at the bottom. Let's start with your feet. Let's start with your knee positioning or your shin angle and stuff like that. Okay, we can get that. Who cares about the breathing right now? Because we're just teaching, we're learning, right? And there's not a barbell on their back with 200 pounds or anything, right? It's body weight. So it's kind of like that, I'll say quotes, the art of coaching, where you have to understand the language that helps the person learn, just like you said with Rickson Gracie there. So, yeah.
I recorded a podcast with another guy, a mutual friend of ours, Leighton.
Oh, yeah.
And that was something we were talking about this morning was, I think it would be the difference between doing leadership, and I guess in your context, it would be coaching, doing leadership from a place of ego and doing it from a place of love. And it goes back to like what Rickson said about knowing the why and the how you're doing and saying what you're doing. Yeah. What we were talking about this morning was properly to lead well and to teach effectively and to coach effectively. Like you said, there has to be buy-in on the end of your trainee. Yeah. There also has to be connection on the side of the coach or the leader, in the sense that there's relationship and trust established. So you know what to say and they have enough trust in you to be persuaded. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the time, if I'm working with somebody brand new, they why would they trust me? You know, they might have heard about me from somebody else, being like, oh, this guy's pretty good. This guy knows what he's talking about. He'll help you out like crazy. Okay, cool. So they come in, but trust hasn't been built. It's like a secondhand sort of a thing. So then it's taking them from and a lot of time it comes through in the assessment. So people will be doing something and we'll find a limitation and I'll say, okay, try this and breathe like this and then try this again. So they make those small, like 1 or 2 changes, and we see a massive improvement in mobility or stability or their ability to perform a specific movement pattern. And then they're literally like blown away. So I have a client. When she came to me probably about 5 or 6 months ago, she wanted to learn how to squat, but she had pain in the front of her hip, only on one side whenever she would squat with a barbell. And she's like, I've never really been able to squat. Went, okay, let's try this one thing. It took us maybe 30, 45 seconds to clear hip impingement with a banded distraction sort of a thing, with a band around her hip, and just some squatting and some moving like that. And retest the movement pattern, unloaded. Oh, it feels way better. Okay, now let's put a bar on your back, empty bar. Oh, this feels a lot better. Now let's put 95 pounds on there. Does the reps for like 5, whatever, however many we're doing that day. She's like, I've never lifted this amount of weight in my life. And I feel pain-free. Okay, now she has buy-in, right? Because I've taken her in about 10 minutes from a position of wishing she could squat with a bar on her back to now squatting with 95 pounds or 100 pounds on her back. You better believe that in that 10 minutes, she has bought in to whatever I have been telling her on how to improve this specific position, right? So now she's super excited. Now she wants to squat. Now she wants to see how she can challenge it. And she sent me a video the other day, like this week, squatting 245 for 3 sets of singles. And so in 6 months, we put 200 pounds on her squat, because she was only squatting with an empty bar, which is 45. So in like however many months, let's say 5 months, 200 pounds on her squat. She has buy-in, like she trusts me, she trusts the process, and we've been able to do that with a few other different exercises as well. So it's like, why would she not trust that process? And it all comes from knowing your client, understanding their needs, listening to them, being like, hey, I want to squat. Okay, maybe you're not ready for it right now, but let's fix this issue. Let's get you practicing on some other variations of a squat, some easier variations of a squat to get you prepped for that. And then let's put that bar on your back. And then let's see where we can take it from there. So
Something else we're both really passionate about and I've been a part of is discipleship.
yeah,
And I think there's so many parallels between coaching and discipleship in the sense that if you're not getting buy-in, it's not going to go anywhere, right? And it could actually be a really toxic relationship if you're not doing it with buy-in. I know you've discipled tons of people over the years, and I think you're one of the people in my life who I've seen do it consistently in a really healthy way.
Okay.
And that hasn't been because there's a lot of stuff that goes on that's very toxic and manipulative as well, right?
Okay,
Where it gets compliance, based on compliance and fear instead of buy-in.
Oh, yeah.
I was wondering if you could speak to that. Like, what does that look like in the context of discipleship? How do you build that buy-in with, and that applies to every area of life too, right? Because ultimately it's all the same thing, but
it really is. So I'm thinking about my kids, like discipling my kids and teaching them how to be productive humans who don't just like drain society as they get older, right? Like they're going to be able to contribute meaningfully.
Right.
So it's teaching them about hard work. It's teaching them about time management, which is something that I'm still learning about. But it's teaching them what it looks like to help others, to serve others before themselves, right? And oftentimes the best way to do it is just to do it yourself and to pull people into what you're doing, My wife and I lead a young adults or a young married Bible study group at our church, and that's discipleship. And in the past, we've done it a few different ways, but this year what we're planning on doing is trying to build that whole community aspect a lot more, which is, hey, let's get everybody to come over to our house before our meeting, and let's just eat a meal together. Like, everybody bring some food, we'll cook it up, and then let's spend time eating together, talking together, getting to know each other a little bit better. And then they can see how we do life. They'll see us, how we interact with our kids. They'll see us, how we interact with the whole group in a different setting, not so much of a formal setting of like, we're going to learn about the Bible now. It's like, let's become more acquainted with each other. Let's build relationship. And then once we understand each other better, once we have this better bond, then we can dive into deeper things. And it's going to be a lot more fun. It's going to be, I think, more meaningful, and it's going to be more interesting. So, I think it's just basically taking people along on the journey of what you're doing, what you're learning, and then just imparting that onto them and doing it with them instead of doing it at them. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Doing it with them instead of doing it at them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the Gospels, like that's what Jesus did. Like he went to Zacchaeus' house and you pulled him down from a tree and said, hey, I'm coming over to eat tonight. And then the next thing you know, Zacchaeus is like drastically transformed and he's repaying all these things that he did or money that he took dishonestly from tax collecting and things like that. And he's repaying it even more because he was able to connect with the person of Jesus and he saw how he lived, and he was able to really just feel, sounds weird, but feel his vibe. I don't know, but
Well, I was going to say to that was Zacchaeus promising to repay
like four times more.
four times whatever he'd conned people out of.
Yeah.
Like that's buy-in, if there ever was buy-in.
Oh yeah.
And I think that goes to show the power of the authenticity in the connection, because you don't have that kind of buy-in if there isn't connection and trust beforehand.
Absolutely not. So yeah, it's with leadership, parenting, coaching, marriage, everything. Like that's like everything you're doing is discipleship. If you have somebody else with you and you're trying to help them learn something, you know, or help them change their lifestyle into something different, that's discipleship. So hey, in a matter of speaking, like what I'm doing in here with my clients is a form of discipleship. And I think that's really cool because, like I said before, God has given me this passion for training, and he's given me this gift, or maybe, I don't know if gift, but like the ability to, like I'm pretty good with people. Mm-hmm. I like people, and I like helping people understand why they're doing things in here. And I like helping people understand the potential that they have with their body physically. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm walking the walk, I'm talking the talk, and they can see it too. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, this guy's doing the same thing. I'm just pulling them into my world and what I'm doing, and I'm trying to impart the same wisdom onto them, with them, not just at them. And they're seeing it, they're seeing the benefit of it in their life, you know? So they're feeling less pain. They're more mobile, they're stronger. They're realizing their goals, like their body compositions are changing and things like that, right? So it's literally discipleship. And I think if God has called me to do something like this, when I'm walking in that and I'm using the gifts that he has given me and the abilities that he's given me to do this job, that's like a form of worship even. You know, it's like I'm doing what I was created to do, and it's honoring God, you know? Like, it doesn't get any better than that. So
and I think that's kind of, even in the first 2 or 3 episodes, I think that's the direction that this podcast is kind of going, is evolving into, and the vision that I'm having is finding people. I loved what Richard Young said in the first episode, where he said, Jesus isn't compartmentalized. Like, Jesus isn't just Sunday morning. He's like, Christ isn't a part of my life. Christ is my life. And everything I do flows out of that reality. Yeah. And I think that's the reality that I really want to showcase on this show, is people doing the things that they were created to do, and excelling in them and having mastery, and doing it in a healthy way, where they're not doing it because they need to validate themselves, but they're doing it from a place of passion and enjoyment, because they already know that God loves them. Yeah, they're not trying to prove anything to anyone, but they're doing it because they love it, because they're honoring God, like you said, they're worshiping through what they're doing. Yeah, and because they're offering service to the people around them and being a resource to the people in their life. I like it that you're exposing these people, or like bringing it to light, you know? Yeah, and I think that's when I was kind of thinking about what to do a podcast on, because I was like, I've got so many different interests and so many different things that I really like, and like I wanted to have like a finance Instagram page and podcast, and do something on like fitness, and like do something else of just writing, and like all these different ideas. And I realized like I have a lot of different interests, but I'm not expert level in any one of them. But I realized that from all my different connections pursuing these things, I know so many different people who are experts and are terrific people, and are really, they're pursuing mastery in these diverse areas, and they're doing it in a way that honors God, honors people, and that is congruent with the people that God created them to be. So they're actually fulfilled and have a lot of freedom doing what they're created to do. Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of my goal, is that people would be empowered watching this podcast, and that the dreams and visions that God has put on their hearts would be endorsed. Yeah. And that maybe this would kind of be a go-ahead or a sign to them to quit stalling and just take that baby step into being the person that God created you to be. As men, we're pretty aimless a lot of the time. Yeah. And don't have a clear sense of purpose or direction. Yeah. I would say, number one, like if you're a young man and you're in high school or just getting out of high school and you don't know what to do, so get a job. Learn how to work. Who cares where it is? Learn how to be productive.
learn how to work hard, and learn how to hustle. You know, I think that's something that's missing. My dad always taught us, he taught us how to work. And even growing up, like we had a lawn care business when I was like 12. We had a go-kart and we had a little trailer and we would haul a lawnmower all over town, me and my brothers. And then we would just mow lawns and just provide the service. We're in a go-kart and a little wooden trailer. Mm-hmm. We're working. I think I got my first job in 9th grade, pushing carts. I was babysitting kids since the 6th grade. You know, it's like since grade 6, like 10 years old or 11 years old, I've been earning money, you know, and my dad always just said, like, work, you know, it's good for you. It's a biblical principle. Ecclesiastes says like that's the only thing that's actually worthwhile. Everything else is meaningless, right? Like work, an honest day's toil, right? Even as a kid, if I wanted a job somewhere, people would know my dad, and they'd say, "Oh, you're Gary's kid? Oh, hire this guy instantly," you know, because they know my dad, they know his reputation, and then they know that he would have taught us to do the same thing. Yeah. So I've never had a hard time getting a job. Yeah. People are always like, "Oh yeah, we'll hire you." No questions asked. Do I need a resume? No. Do I need an application form? No. You can start tomorrow. Okay, great. You know, and it's just because of that reputation of just working hard. Yeah. Then it would be like, even if you hate the job, do it with gusto. You know, clean that bathroom like it's the queen's bathroom, you know, whatever. And then after that, I don't know, try and find something that you would like to do, because oftentimes doing something you hate will cause you to think about doing something that you would really love to do, right? Like working at Canadian Tire was okay, but it wasn't my dream, right? So then I would think about, while I'm doing this job that I don't necessarily love, like what kind of a job would I love? Well, I'd probably love something to do with exercise. Is there even a career for that? Next thing you know, oh yeah, there's a degree in kinesiology, which is exercise and human movement. No way, I think I'm gonna do that. And then next thing you know, 10 years later after graduation, here I am. I'm owning my own business and helping people in my community, which is my dream, right? So, yeah. I think it all starts with just learning how to work hard. Work hard, you know? Yeah. You'll never fall behind working hard. Yeah. You know? It's like being strong. It's never a bad thing to be strong. Mark Bell always says, strength is never a weakness, weakness is never a strength. You know? And yeah, you're just gonna be that much more valuable. You're gonna be that much more respected. And you're gonna be employed. You know, no matter what. If this whole thing all of a sudden flops and I lose everything, I know that I'll be able to go find a job somewhere else, because it doesn't matter. I'm gonna work like it's my favorite thing in the world to do, even if it's not.
Where can people find out about you?
Oh yeah. People can find me on Instagram at 431 Strength Squadron. My bearded face and long hair will show up on your search at the top. Yeah, that's my main platform that I'm on. The physical location here, it's in the edge of town. It's beautiful out here. 286 Park Road, unit number 10, Steinbach, Manitoba. That's where I'm at physically. And yeah, that's about it.
Sweet, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on, bro. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.